Chapter 10, Naomi Erlanger. The bad news? Lena said she didn't have the hots for Daryl or for Grant Tubman, at least not until the infection in his tongue stud cleared up. The good news? She didn't come out and say she was interested in Zach. But how could she not be? He was by far the coolest guy at Sea Average, totally adorable, and the mastermind behind making Cap Anderson 8th grade president. Although I have to admit, I thought stealing his shoes went a little too far. Zach didn't agree. Come on, what kind of person sits in front of his locker with his eyes shut, barefoot and mumbling in some foreign language? He was practically begging for it. I consoled myself with the fact that they weren't even shoes. They were made out of some kind of dried leaves. Technically, we did Cap a favor because the next day he showed up in real sneakers. We're bringing him into 21st century, Zach insisted. His eyes looked so sincere and so blue that I just had to go along with it. I couldn't help myself. I kept on writing love notes from Lorelei Lumley to slip into Cap's locker. Dear Capricorn, I waited all day and was heartbroken when you didn't come. You must have thought I meant storeroom B376 of the middle school. Silly me, I was in storeroom B376 of the high school. There's no storeroom B376 at the middle school, but I guess you already know that. Please, please, please give me another chance. Meet me at... The rest was a giant tomato soup stain. I didn't know about Cap, but it would have driven me crazy. Another note continued directions to a small courtyard off the library. There was only one door, and it locked as soon as it closed behind you. Poor Cap spent 2 hours in there until a custodian found him and set him free. I felt pretty awful about it, but my hands were tied. I was with Zach. We watched from a spot on the roof, expecting him to go berserk. He never did. He called for help a few times, but mostly he spent the day in the lotus position with his new sneakers off, meditating. I could sense Zach was a little frustrated that Cap wasn't putting on more of a show. Why isn't he yelling or crying or at least banging on the windows, begging for rescue? To be honest, I couldn't explain it either. Cap was weird, but there was more to it than that. There was something inside him that nobody else understood, something mysterious and strong. Not muscle strong or fighting strong, a kind of strength that gave him the self-control to meditate instead of falling apart, or to ignore what other people thought and find meaning in a dead bird. I couldn't say that to Zach, of course, so I tried to be supportive. Look on the bright side, I offered from our vantage point on the roof. He didn't go nuts, but he was down there a really long time. Zach was not consoled. Yeah, and we were up here a really long time. What's the point of pranking someone if the prank's on you as much as on him? He had a point. Cap Anderson was the ultimate 8th grade president. He fell for every gag, hook, line, and sinker, more than a Luke Simmerd or a Hugh Winkleman ever would. There was only one problem. He wasn't reacting. You could harass him, you just couldn't upset him. Even when Zach told him that he was expected to plan the entire Halloween dance, he was mellow about it. Last year, that was what had put Luke over the edge. Cap just said, I've never been to a dance. He didn't even refuse to do it, but we knew he wasn't going to. That made Zach mad. We should have hung him off the wires, not just his sandals. I only had one class with Cap, math. He never opened his mouth, yet whenever the teacher called on him, he always came up with the answer. Zach claimed Cap was the dumbest kid in school, but he was really smart. He had no friends except maybe Hugh Winkleman, who had to be worse than nobody. Or maybe not. Those two ate lunch together every single day. It looked like Hugh did most of the talking, but that made sense. Cap was new, and surely he had questions about everything that was happening to him. He had no way of knowing that the person he was using as a guide was an even bigger outcast than he was. So he's friends with Winkleman. Big surprise, Zach sneered. Nobody normal would ever hang out with him. The stuff he does, what kid in a million years would ever want to do it with him? He had a point. Meditation wasn't big in middle school. When Cap wasn't in the lotus position in front of his locker, he was usually in the music room, strumming a guitar and singing to himself. It was always 60s music, too. I recognized the Beatles and some of the folksier stuff you hear on the classic rock stations. And every morning he was out in the schoolyard performing these slow motion, dance like martial arts moves. Zach called it hippie ballet, but I thought it was kind of graceful and athletic. I asked Cap about it. It's Tai Chi, he explained. It develops balance through a blending of mental and physical energy. Yeah, but why are you doing it here, where everybody can see you? Zach demanded. Because if I do it where I live, somebody pours water on me. You could depend on that kind of comment from Cap. It might have made sense, but only to him. The whole thing was really starting to get on Zach's nerves. I'm going to break this kid if it's the last thing I do. I had to speak up. Is this really necessary? Can't we just switch to Winkleman or something? Winkleman isn't president, Zach insisted. It's too late to go back and change that. Anger didn't suit Zach. His jaw was stuck out, his skin flushed and taut. This wasn't the future boyfriend I'd always envisioned. We're eighth graders, he went on. This is supposed to be our year. I'm not going to give that up because some hairy Sasquatch stepped through a time warp from the 60s. We went to see Lena. She was the authority when it came to spreading the word. And what Zach had in mind amounted to calling the entire eighth grade down on Cap. He was not to walk through a crowded hall without his feet being kicked out from under him. The cafeteria line was to become an obstacle course of tripping legs. He would be a living, breathing bullseye for spitballs, rubber bands, apple cores, and flying soup. It was open season on the eighth grade president, especially on the school bus, where there were no teachers, and the only rule is anything goes. Cap's reaction? He floated through it all like he didn't even notice anyone was messing with him. No, it went beyond that. He didn't notice anyone messing with him. He wasn't happy, but he didn't look unhappy either. And here's the part I'd never admit to anyone, certainly not to Zach. Deep, deep down, I was rooting for Cap to stick it back in all our faces. For sure, we deserved it, especially me, because I was starting to know better.